a very long time, more than a decade, I don't think success to us meant anything other than making a game that our one friend enjoyed.
I think we were all the way back in 2007 is really when we started working on the game. We were working on a few projects around that time. So Brian was building this roguelike engine. We've been working many years on the technical complexities of a roguelike. And at the same time, we're big tabletop fans. We were doing tabletop gaming, and we were building out our own setting and our own rule set. And at some point, we kind of had the idea to combine these projects and to make this wild science fantasy world we were building, to put it into the terms of a systems-driven roguelike. And it kind of just snowballed from there.
We had no commercial aspirations for the project at all, and instead had taken an idea, which was mixing up this mesh of influences which we had drawn from just having anything that was playable was successful.
We did take a break in the middle, 2012, to make a game called Wood, which is a much more condensed little distilled roguelike, and we put that out in 2014.
Wood was, in fact, our first big foray into Unity. It was a testing ground. Caves of Qud at the time was a C# project. I decided to use Unity to ship Wood on both PC and mobile, having never shipped a mobile game before. And I found the process really easy. I was able to do it by myself. I was really impressed with Unity's ability to go cross-platform. And that led me to, when Wood shipped, to say, well, let me experiment with taking Caves of Qud and putting it inside Unity as a host, because then maybe I can gain the ability to go to mobile as easily as I was able to with Wood. Before Caves of Qud, the engine that became Caves of Qud was finalized. I had been attempting to build roguelike engines for many years, and I found huge issues with very classic object hierarchy class systems in a game where we wanted very diverse kinds of things. Unity and Caves of Qud allow you to say, well, an object isn't a tree of components. It's a set of properties that are composed together to make it. So I can say, here's something that defines a liquid volume, and here's something that defines armor. I can make an object that's just a bag of those properties, and that's exactly how Unity works. And it ends up being a very powerful tool for building complex games. And so it works very well in Unity. It works very well in Caves of Qud. I think that almost all the big engines use some sort of composition system now. It's common now, but at the time that both of the systems started, it was not.
Sometimes people look at it and say, like, I don't see the story here, or it's just you're going and exploring this world, but there's not a cohesive narrative. But I think it's a paradigm of narrative game that has existed for a while, and that, like, we love, where these systems are colliding and the sort of collision and the emergent stuff that happens becomes fodder for this really, like, your personalized narrative that, you know, we've sketched out as the authors and designers of the game, but, like, a lot of it is going to be particular to the player.
But interactive form means involving the player, involving them in the stories that are being generated. Those stories are still authored, right? It is true that they're being produced by systems, but those systems aren't random. They're not random things that are happening. Those are carefully authored systems by our narrative team to produce the kind of stories that the players traverse through.
Caves of Qud's approach to procedurally generating environments tends to be very multi-layered. So our big example is we generate these villages. We want these to feel like lived-in villages with history and with dynamic characters in them that have desires. They'll send you off on quests, but also like spaces you could examine and see the paintings and sculptures on. And a lot of this is like, we'll take one technique to generate the history. We have like this complex state machine where we're running through thousands of years of history, and then we're going to use that to inform the sort of what the government of the village looks like and what characters might be and what type of buildings might be placed in the village. And then we're going to go like, okay, now we're going to actually generate this map.
I think the most important thing in Qud is to give people the important bones to hang a interesting story on. And that's true for almost all of our systems, like the AI system, like the narrative system. We aren't painting every pixel. We aren't simulating every thought that the creature has, but they are taking interesting actions, and there's a lot of meaning imbued in those basic mechanical systems like the weights of the actions that they're going to take. The designers can control that, and that controllability is really important because the stories we're trying to tell aren't stories about random actions.
What's fun to see is that players get really good at kind of reading the tone of what we're setting up in the game, the types of stories that might exist in this strange science fiction far future setting, which, contains a lot of possibilities, but still, we have a very strong voice in the game, and so it's kind of like a distinct place. And then players get good at telling their own stories in that voice because they're engaging with these systems, and they're learning what is interesting to them and what is interesting to the system and what that overlap is. There's so many pressures to make a certain type of game and to think of games as a sort of product.
I would say if you're interested in making games, the business is so hard. The technology is so hard. Everything about it is hard, except the people that are working in games are all the most amazing people because they're all reckoning mostly successfully with all of these difficulties. And they're all happy to find somebody that wants to throw themselves into that volcano with them and learn and help each other make it. 1, 2, 3.
Live and drink.